And welcome back to week 2 of Bottom of the Clutch. My name is Sean, and baseball is finally back. And man, it feels good. I'm almost ready to double down with some clutch action in the 2021 High Heat Discord League this summer. If you're still relatively new to clutch baseball, make sure you're joining our community on Discord to keep up with the most up-to-date spoilers and updates. This link can be found on our website or below in this video. This week, I will be speaking with Paul Seeley, our most recent clutch champion and winner of the Polar Power Winter League on Discord. Missed last week's first episode of the year. We announced that all of our player cards from 2020 will be legal in 2021 due to the COVID-19 shortened season. If you're new to the game, the strategy cards will be used in clutch baseball will follow the formation rotation. So that means that strategy cards will be legal for 3 calendar years. So strategy cards from 2019, 2020, and 2021 will be legal this year. I'm excited to be discussing a lot of the questions surrounding strategy card rulings, team building, and team strategy with clutch players from all around the league on these episodes every Wednesday. So let me introduce our first guest, your reigning champ and Polar Power Champions, Paul Seeley, manager of the Fed Weezy Fushions. Hey Paul, how are we doing so far in 2021?
I can't complain. I built myself a nice throne. I've had champagne, every other night. The whole ball club is just super, super thrilled that we finally get to be reigning champions.
You know what, Paul? That's great to hear. I'm so glad it worked out for you last season. I know every team that you go into building, constructing, and spending hours, constructing over players in your head, who are you going to plug in, what's going to go with what strategy, and so much goes to it. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about what went into that season for you last year and what led to that success, because that's difficult. We had 30 teams in the league, over the course of a pretty long season, going into, a 5-game playoff series format. So what would you say your strategy was that you used to build your team championship last year? What was the first thing you did? Was it players? Was it a strategy card build you went around, a stadium? What was it for you?
Well, first, I'm glad to be here, and I am really excited to go into detail on how I thoroughly am better than everybody else in Polar Power League. I think I went into my team thinking that there were specific players I wanted. I wanted to have Babe Ruth on my team because his card is awesome.
Of course.
And I went in thinking, okay, I want Matt Moore and Julio Urias on my team because those cards are awesome. And so I kind of started there for my hitting and my pitching and built around that. I had certain strategy cards in mind. I knew I wanted to use strategy cards around just hitting with power dies, hitting well, and just kind of adding power die and swing bonuses and just drawing as much as possible is basically my strategy deck. The only thing is I knew I wanted to use Setup Man 2.0, so I made sure to have 2 players eligible for that in my bullpen. And beyond that, I knew I wasn't going to make a whole lot of use out of speed cards, and so most of my team is fairly slow.
Yeah, it sounds like you and me have a similar strategy. I mean, I went heavy with the power this year. I went with Babe Ruth. I went for those, those overpowering, power die strategy cards we were looking for. And I, too, did the same thing where I felt like I kind of constructed my team more so without thinking of the strategy cards, because there's been so many diverse cards this year. You bring up, Julio Urias for the Dodgers. That card was a no-doubter for me. And I think that 4 IP starting pitcher card is going to start revolutionizing clutch. It's kind of already doing that in baseball. Baseball's already kind of, shortening up. It's almost like we're starting to watch high school games, where we see guys come in 1, 2, 3 names at a time and just overpower guys and then go into the bullpen for that. So, thinking of that, thinking of getting more in that high school feel, the game is changing, so clutch is changing with it. Was there a specific coach or strategy card combination that you were able to use that maybe somehow worked, even though you necessarily didn't really build your team around it?
My last change I had to my team was I had an extra 70 points, and I had a 50-point center fielder. And I decided, well, maybe I'll just upgrade that to Billy Hamilton, so I have somebody who's really fast. And I made him my 9-hitter, and I was like, oh, that would be a good use to use slap hit with. And I didn't realize exactly how good that would be, but my 9-hitter hit 333 over the course of the season, which is extremely good for a very cheap 9-hitter. And there were many games that my bats weren't doing good because it was like a pitching heavy matchup, but I had Billy Hamilton to give me a run. There was one game I won 1-0, and the only run I got was Billy Hamilton slap hitting a single, stealing second, and getting home runs. Had built this deck with all of these cards, and I had like probably 40-something cards that I'm like, I'm definitely using these cards. So it wasn't worth it to spend money on speed if I'm not getting a huge amount of return on it in this scrappy market.
Yeah, that's really great that you were able to build around that defense part of your stadium and then kind of do what you wanted on offense. But if you were to tweak one thing about your team, what would it be? And not necessarily just the players, coaches, strategy cards, what would you tweak?
I think I would probably not have used Phil Nevin. Phil Nevin is a decent card. The main reason I used him was so that I could use a platoon of Austin Allen and Pat Malenka at catcher/third base, and then Nevin would play whatever the other one was. Ultimately, Nevin was a fine hitter, but he was my 5-hitter, and I could have used a little bit better of a hitter at that spot. I didn't use things like his +3 clutch with strat cards nearly as much as I thought I would. And so the platoon was nice, but I could have found something a little bit worse in exchange for a better 5-hitter. That probably would have been better. And I really don't have a whole lot of things I would tweak a whole lot about my team.
Yeah, it sounds like the platooning kind of worked, and it just sounds like you were saying you weren't really able to utilize your clutch, which you had with Phil Nevin. So that leads me to the question: was it because you just weren't in enough clutch situations? Were you either up by too much or down by too much? Because I mean, you were obviously having a winning season. Were you just winning the games by too much?
No, it was more that as I went through the season, a lot of the strategy cards that used clutch got pushed out of my deck. So I would still include cards like Cold Blooded, and I would still include cards like Battle of Nerves at times, or Full Count at times, depending on my opponent. Primetime 2.0 got pushed out of my deck a lot from other cards that I felt more consistent. And it wasn't like it was a bad card, like it worked well, but if you can only use that in clutch moments, and I had a card that I felt like was almost as good for the matchup, but I would be able to use it the whole game, that ended up falling out of my deck more than I thought it would when I built it.
I agree completely. I used the same card, and I feel like I used it in like a lot of discard situations just because I didn't have that opportunity to play it. Do you feel like you've ever rostered a player just because you wanted them on your team because it was like your favorite player or something, and like that's something you've regretted, or?
I don't know if I would say regret, but I've definitely done that before. In High Heat, I rostered Marco Gonzalez because I'm a Seattle baseball fan, and I love Marco Gonzalez, and he's awesome. And then he did perfectly fine for me, but I just needed that card in there. I really tried to make Ken Griffey Jr. work with my Polar Power team. I played a lot of practice games with him, and I just couldn't get him to work. I wasn't using, he gives you tons of defense, speed icons, all of that stuff, and I just wasn't using it enough to make it worth it. And so I didn't have him on my team for Polar Power, even though I really wanted to.
We're going to blame the Ken Griffey Jr. one on a small sample size. It's got to be that, because I was loving Babe Ruth in 2020. I want more of that this year.
Babe Ruth was awesome.
So, I mean, you being a Seattle fan, I feel like I have an inkling, probably know maybe what you're going to choose for my next question for you, but so far, from what you've seen in spoilers from being on Discord, which by the way, if you haven't, make sure you join our Discord. Which card from the X9 or the X10 previews we've spoiled so far are you most excited about coming up this year?
This is probably going to surprise you, actually. I'm really excited for Darren Ruff because I think he's exactly the kind of player I like.
That would have been one of my last guesses probably for your choice.
Yeah, I love that card because he is fairly slow, which I tend not to value speed that much. He has decent defense for first base, but bad defense for the outfield, which I'm also okay with. His chart's just amazing, and he's a right-handed hitter with an R+3 bonus, which is really handy because a lot of players will try to get opposite-handed bonuses on their pitchers. So they'll pitch somebody like Oliver Drake, who is a right-handed pitcher, but has a bonus against lefties, because then they get that bonus against lefties as well as switch hitters. So if my opponent's doing that, I destroy a pitcher trying to do that with Darren Ruff. And even if I own, he's only 10 on base, but extra 3 against righties. So even the 10 on base is still good with that chart, but you can utilize that to make certain pitcher matchups really difficult.
I'm totally glad you explained that and went into detail about it, because I probably didn't broadly ask the question enough, because I would have gotten more what I thought was going to be my obvious answer. We'll see if we spoil it here. This would include the reprints of the LE Legends.
I mean, the other one would probably be Jay Buhner.
Okay. It was really interesting to hear, your build about your team. It makes me feel confident about my team, because I feel like I had the same power idea with you with the power die, and building around those 4 IP starting pitching. And just like you said, for Setup Man 2.0, I swear that is what carried my team this year into the playoffs. I did the same exact thing, rostering my bullpen with a few guys, with holds and K icons, and it felt like you could completely, take the air out of someone else, by not allowing them to play, any card that in. I went with that same strategy, worked for me. Do you feel like that was maybe the biggest power move of your strategy cards, or what would it have been to win your championship? What was the key to winning the championship?
I think stuff like that definitely helps, because it gives you an opportunity to just deny your opponent something in a really big situation. I would say the biggest key, honestly, was that I had a really deep and diverse bullpen. I had a lot of different pitchers who were very good, who, righties, lefties, different kind of bonuses, different innings, different charts, different command setups. So I was able to find a lot with cards like Tommy Hunter, Robbie Erlin, Stephen Tarpley, just being able to play my matchups as much as possible. And that goes with the 4 IP, 5 IP starting pitchers. It's just having a deep bullpen and kind of using it to give yourself really good matchups, I think, helped a ton.
Well, Paul, I'm really glad it worked for your team, and you finally get to bring home that trophy this year and, sit on it. You get to be that reigning champ for this entire year. You get to enjoy that. So continue to enjoy the 2021 season. I'm looking forward and excited to talking to you more about, some of the cards we're going to be releasing, what your plans are for this season, and, see how that strategy is going to play up. Are we going to keep shifting from that, power relievers? Or is it, going to be more of that dominant hitting? So 2021, what's it going to be? So once again, Paul, thank you for coming on. You've been an awesome guest.
Thank you. I'll see you when you interview me as the 2021 High Heat champion.
There you go. I'm really looking forward to that. We need to get some more clutch back in our lives. But before we get to the High Heat season, you'll just have to come back next week with me, where I'm going to have another previous champion on with us. So you're just going to have to see who that is. So once again, I'm Sean Norberg, and this has been Bottom of the Clutch.